Lesson 5.5, Proportions. A proportion is two ratios that are equal. For example, I have two sets of fractions written at the bottom. One represents a proportion and one doesn't. The way we prove whether or not it is a proportion is to see if both fractions are equal. We can use cross products to do that. So if you do 5 times 6, you get 30. If you do 15 times 2, you also get 30. This is a proportion because they both came out to the same value. The second one, if I do 3 times 7, I get 21. 10 times 2, I get 20. Those numbers are not equal, which means this is not a proportion. So the first one, the answer is yes, it's a proportion, and the second one, no, it is not a proportion. Now, the property of proportions say that the product of the extremes is equal to the product of the means. So if we use this as an example, we have AB is equal to CD. We read it as A is to B as C is to D. Now, AD is the extremes and BC is the means. You are not required to remember which is the extremes and which is the means. You just need to remember when you cross multiply that A and D are a pair that get multiplied together, and C and B are the other pair that get multiplied together. So now, just pause the video and prove whether or not either of these examples are proportions. If you multiply 5 times 4, you get 20. 10 times 2, you get 20. 20 does equal 20, so this is a proportion. The answer is yes. On example number 2, multiply 4 times 10 is 40. 13 times 3 is 39. They are not equal, so the answer is no, it is not a proportion. Okay, now we can also use proportions to find missing values. We are still going to use cross products, but we're also going to apply algebra. So here, multiply 5 times m and then 2 times 25. So it would be set up as 5m equals 2 times 25. And now we need to use our algebra to solve it. So 5m equals 50. Divide both sides by 5 because we want to isolate the m and get it by itself. And then m is equal to 10. Now, please pause the video and take a moment to try to answer the next question. Okay, using our cross products, we multiply this way, we end up with 9n equals, go the other way, 6 times 21. So 9n equals 126. Divide both sides by 9. And n equals, 9 goes into 12 one time, with 3 left over. 9 goes into 36 4 times. So n equals 14. Now, one of the things to remember when you're doing proportions, if you're dealing with two different groups when you're setting it up, because that's what ratios do, they compare two different things, you need to make sure that on both parts of the proportion you have the same thing on the top as you do on the bottom. So for example, in the problem that we're doing here, it says the ratio of adults to students. So we know we're dealing with adults, so we put that number on the top, and then we can put students on the bottom. And we do the same thing when we get to the other side. It's so many adults over students. If you do it that way, it will help you keep it straight. Now go back and finish reading the problem. It says the ratio of adults to students on a bus is 2 to 7. So we take that 2 to 7 to set up the first ratio. So the 2 goes on the top because we're talking about 2 adults. The 7 goes on the bottom because we're talking about 7 students. Second sentence, if there are 8 adults, how many students are on the bus? Well, where would we put the 8? We look back in the problem to see that the 8 is talking about adults. Since it's talking about adults, you put the 8 next to adults. And now we can see what we're looking to find. The problem also tells us what we're looking to find. It says how many students are on the bus. So now what we need to do is figure out students by putting the variable in the missing spot. And now we're going to use our cross products to solve. If we use our cross products to solve, we write our equation as such. 2n equals 8 times 7. 2n equals 56. Divide both sides by 2, and you get n equals 28. So the answer is 28 students are on the bus. Okay, here is another problem. I would like you to pause the video, set up your proportion, and try and solve it. Okay, since Sam can paint 200 feet of privacy fence in 3 hours, that would be your first part of the proportion. So it's 200 feet over 3 hours. Then it says, to the nearest foot, how many feet can he paint in 5 hours? Well, we know that over here we have to have hours on the bottom because we have the same thing on the top as we do on the bottom. So those two things have to be in the same spot. So now we have 5 hours. We put the 5 in there, which is meaning that feet is missing here, so the variable will go in the missing spot. Now, one of the key things I want to point out to you in this particular problem is it says round it to the nearest foot. Many times when it's telling you that, it's letting you know that it will not come out to a whole number. So we need to do some estimating and rounding when we're done. So here you cross multiply. You get 3n equals 1,000. Then divide both sides by 3. And you end up with n equals 3 goes into 10 3 times with 1 left over. 3 goes into 10 3 times with 1 left over. 3 goes into 10 3 times with 1 left over. So we have a remainder of 1. Since it came out to 333 with remainder of 1, or 1/3, we can estimate 33 1/3 to the nearest foot would be approximately 333, because 1/3 is less than a half. If it's less than a half, we round down. This concludes our video for today. Please write down any questions that you have and ask them in class tomorrow. Have a great day. God bless.